Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden, and we're also going to stick to my home county of Skåne here in the very south of the country. Now we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel once before. These guys are a very new addition to the Swedish beer scene and the Skånsk beer scene, I guess we can say as well, but I have seen their beers popping up on the shelves more and more often in the different Systembolaget around here, which is quite cool to see. It has been a little while since I reviewed one of their beers. I think it was about 2 years ago, but these guys seem to do a bunch of different IPAs, a few sour beers, and they are starting to do some lagers as well, which seem to be quite interesting. So the one we're going to have a look at today is a style that I haven't tried from them before. It's a style that I very much enjoy though, and one that I've been getting into again over the last couple of years, and it's also one of their latest releases through Systembolaget here too. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, as I said, we are going to stick to my home county of Skåne here in the south of the country. We're going to go up toward Ängelholm in the kind of northwestern corner of the county, and out a little bit east to a wee place called Untappd, and that means that we're going to have a look at another beer from Ofrälse Brygghus. So this particular beer is called Ofrälse Pilzen. It comes in at 4.6% ABV, and as the name suggests, this one is a Czech style Pilsner. But this is apparently brewed with local Skånsk ingredients as well, and that was one of the main things that caught my eye about this one actually. So yeah, let's crack on with this and see what it's all about. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Ofrälse Brygghus before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated, and remember you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer based on the geography tagging system. So just use the search bar in there, put your hometown, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever you like in. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Swedish playlist along with many other things. And of course you can look at the playlist of beers from other countries as well. There are quite a few in there. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about Ofrälse Brygghus then. So, Ofrälse Brygghus, from what I understand, are a gypsy brewery who brew in different places, but they do have a little base in Untappd, just out to the east of Ängelholm in Skåne in southern Sweden. And Ängelholm, of course, is in the northwest corner of the county. But the three men behind this company are Simon Leppänen, Adam Uspring and Hampus Taras Wahlberg. And Hampus and Simon actually studied together at Lund and brewed beer together. But Adam studied in Malmö but spent a lot of time together with these guys up in Lund as well. So Simon is a Swedish Finn and studied engineering and now works in UX design, whereas Hampus studied political science and entrepreneurship, and he's been a soldier and entrepreneur, while Adam studied and now works in designing user interfaces as well. But the company is a part-time venture, but they do hope that it can eventually become full-time. But they spent a number of years building up the company, but most things started to happen for them in 2020, and they went on to release their first beers through Systembolaget in January of 2021. From what I understand, these guys have been brewing in a few different places, but I think, I haven't heard exactly, but I would think the most likely place they would be brewing their beers in Skåne would likely be Bryghuset Finn. I know those guys have got quite a little bit of spare capacity up there in Landskrona, so I would suspect that that's where a number of the Ofrälse beers have been brewed thus far, and there will no doubt be more places as well. I think Hyllie Brewery have a little bit of spare capacity too. But the name they chose for the brewery, Ofrälse, this is an old term that literally means like unsaved, and it's in the context of religion, and it was used to refer to peasants back in the day, but it was also to do a little bit with land ownership as well. But like I said to you, in recent times I've been seeing more and more of their beers on the shelves in Systembolaget. They've got a few different IPAs out there, one or two sour beers as well, and they are starting to try some lagers too, which seem to be quite interesting. But as of May 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have released 15 different kinds of beer, and I've just given you a wee summary of the things that I've seen from them so far. I haven't really seen anything dark from them yet, but maybe they just haven't gotten round to brewing that. But yeah, that's everything I can really tell you about these guys. As I said, a very, very new addition to the Swedish and Skånsk beer scenes, but definitely worth checking out if you get the chance. So yeah, if you want to learn more about this brewery, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all of the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on then and have a little look at the beer itself. So you can see this one is a half-litre can, and as I say, it does look very, very nice, very nicely presented, quite classic actually. Plain silver top on the can there. It tells you a little bit about the beer on the side here, but yeah, essentially on the side it just tells you about the different ingredients and things like that. So this one is made with, is brewed with malt from, with barley from Linsgård, and which is then malted at Varbergkvarn in Sörmland, and then they also used hops from Korngården, which isn't too far outside of Lund actually. You can cycle down there, and they of course have their own brewery these days as well, where they use some of their own hops. But like we said earlier, this one is a 4.6% Czech style Pilsner beer. You can also see on the can there is one of the Ofrälse Brygghus symbols. But yeah, really nicely presented, as we say. I forget how much I paid for this can. I want to say that it was maybe about 35 Swedish kroner. I think 35 sounds about right. So 35 kroner is about €3.50, somewhere in the region of £3 sterling, and I guess in the region of like $4 American. So for a half litre of a craft Pilsner, I don't think that's too bad, to be honest with you. But yeah, let's get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. And I have to compliment them as well for going with a half litre can on this one, because yeah, quite often I don't like that when breweries release 330ml cans of lager. For me, a lager has to be a lager is supposed to be a more kind of drinkable and sessionable beer. So I do like that when they have to be in 440s for me, I would say. But yeah, anyway, you can see now that we've got this guy out into the glass, and we can see what it's all about. The two hop varieties in this one, incidentally, I did write these down. It's Magnum and Sapphire. So yeah, both German hops, German hop varieties, but these are of course grown in Sweden. Sapphire is quite interesting because it can give you some little orangey notes and things like that as well. But Magnum, of course, mainly known for its big floral aromaticity. But yeah, anyway, you can see this beer, it actually looks a little bit like a West Coast IPA. I don't think I've come across a Pilsner that has quite such a kind of rich amber colour to it, so that's interesting. But you can see with this one, it's got about a finger, just over a half finger of a frothy, I would say kind of cream coloured head. You can see the bubbles in there are kind of medium sized, but it does look very, very nice, I have to say. Yeah, even if I shine the natural light through it, the beer does have a good little bit of an amber tint to it. It is almost West Coast IPA, like maybe you could compare it to like a Bock or something like that in terms of its colour. But remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar caramelizes, thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect that too. But when it comes to Pilsners, it's not often that you're going to barrel age these and stuff like that. But yeah, a nice little bit of sweeter malty character coming out of this one. But yeah, one or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass there, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head, but there's not too much in the way of visible carbonation, and the beer does have a little bit of a kind of natural haze to it, if you like. But remember, the Pilsner style originated in the Czech city of Pilzen. It was at that time, of course, part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It was actually a German brewer who came across and brewed the style, but apparently he was a little bit of an arsehole, and he was run out of the town within about 2 years or something like that. And then this town, Pilzen, it was lived in by about half the population were ethnic Germans, Austrians, and the other half of the population were ethnic Czechs. But of course this changed after the Second World War and things like that, and the city became pretty much all Czech. So yeah, a little bit, and Pilsner Urquell, of course, were the ones who really kind of pushed this particular style of beer, and then it became popular in lots of different places after that. But yeah, certainly one of the more kind of ambery leaning Pilsners that I've come across, actually. Looks a bit like a West Coast IPA in some sense. But yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the appearance of this one. We can have a little look at the aroma and see what this beer is all about. Aroma-wise, this is quite nice, actually. Yeah, I'm going to say straight away, it has it has everything you'd expect of a Pilsner, but it just has a little bit of rawness to it. I mean, you can tell this is quite small batch brewed, and this is one of the things I like trying. I like about trying beers from slightly newer breweries, because the beers, aren't quite as refined as you might get from some of the guys that have been around a little bit longer, and you can kind of smell that in here. It smells like some of these more Brauhaus type. Smells like some of these more Brauhaus type beers that you'll find down in Germany or Austria or the Czech Republic. It has a little bit of that kind of vibe to it, which I really do like. So I have to give them thumbs up for that in terms of authenticity. This beer does smell very nice, but it has got a little bit of a sweeter edge to it. It does remind me a little bit more of like a Czech Letsak, to be honest with you, the more amber Czech lager. So that's nice. Yeah, aroma-wise, this is pretty nice actually, so I'll say it gets a thumbs up for me on that as well. But let's just break this down and describe it for you a wee bit more in depth. One of the sweeter Pilsners I've come across, a little bit more of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing, but it's definitely one of the more bready and sweeter Pilsners I've come across. But yeah, backbone of the beer, you absolutely have a little bit of that kind of fresh white bready bread crust. You'll notice that straight away with this one. So yeah, lovely fresh kind of white bready bread crust coming out of it. On top of that, you've got a little bit of like a Jacob's cream cracker type thing. There's a tiny little bit of woodiness to the aroma in this beer as well, so that comes out quite a little bit. So yeah, bread crust, a little bit of wood, Jacob's cream cracker, then you start to get the bready notes out of this, which I like. There's a little bit of a wholemeal brown bready bread crust. On top of that, there's a wee bit of a you get a little bit of a kind of wholemeal brown bready type character with this one as well. So yeah, wholemeal brown bready type character in there. A fluffy white bready note too, and then above that you can smell a little bit, you do get a little bit of that crispness from the Pilsner malt in this one. Obviously it's not quite as crisp as you're going to get from the likes of Pilsner Urquell or something like this, but yeah, the way that that goes together I think is really, really nice. On top of that you start to get more of the kind of brown sugary elements out of this one, and it certainly has, this beer certainly does have a little bit more of a, there's a little bit of like a kind of toasty caramel with this one, which I think is very nice. So yeah, a little bit of a kind of toasty caramel for sure. You've got a little bit of a more oily sweet caramel on top of that too. So yeah, nice big kind of oily character to it, sweet caramel in there, a little bit of toasty caramel underneath, and then a little bit of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuit. It's interesting how it all pieces together. This is definitely one of the more kind of brown sugary leaning Pilsners that I can say I've come across over the last little while, and as I said, appearance wise, this one is definitely more amber than a lot of the ones too. So yeah, I think that's everything we really need to say about this beer in terms of the malty side of the aroma. So we can have a little look at the hoppy side of things now. So these hops, as I've mentioned to you, they're German varieties basically, but they're grown here in Sweden. So as I've always said, you can grow the same variety of hop, but in a different part of the world. You've got New Zealand Cascade and you've got American Cascade, and there are little. I find that quite often you get differences in the green component of these hops depending on where you grow them, different water profiles, soil profiles, and all this kind of jazz. But yeah, with this one for me, the earthiness. Normally with German hops, you'll get a very smooth earthiness and a little bit of herbal character. The earthiness is a little bit more pronounced in these ones here, so you can smell there's a wee bit of earthiness coming out of this one. You've got a little bit more herbal character as well, so yeah, the herbal and earthiness is more pronounced than you would get with the herbal character, and the earthiness is a little bit more prominent as well. Then you've got a nice kind of bright floral aromaticity in there, and you've also got a wee bit of a lighter kind of grassy character as well. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together in that sense for me is really quite nice. Yeah, aroma wise, I think this beer goes together really, really nicely, so it gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, the grassiness isn't quite as zesty. It's a little bit of a smooth, wetter grassiness. You just got a wee bit of floral character in there, but it goes together really, really well. Yeah, aromaticity-wise, a little bit more kind of muted, I think, too. So yeah, interesting. It's really interesting to see that with hop varieties, you know quite well, because Sapphire, I remember, and Magnum, both can be quite punchy and spicy with the floral notes, but yeah, otherwise, you don't get so much of that with this one, which is interesting. But yeah, let's have a wee look at the fruity side of things then, just to round off the aroma. So for me, the fruity side of the aroma, you get a little bit of a kind of oily pear, a little bit of sultana out of this one, but you can smell that slightly more oily orange thing coming out of the sapphire in this beer as well, which is quite interesting for me. So your oily orangey sapphire, a little bit of green apple and oily pear, and yeah, a little bit of oily pear and sultana and things like that in this one. So yeah, really, really interesting. Yeah, really, really interesting kind of blend of aromas and stuff going on in this one. Quite a different aroma from what we've had in other Pilsners recently too. But yeah, as I always say, take a bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But I think it is about time that we taste this one and see what it's all about. So yeah, let's do this. This one is the Ofrälse Pilzen, a 4.6% Czech style Pilsner beer from Ofrälse Brygghus here in Skåne in the south of Sweden. Slange, skål, cheers, and nastravi. It's interesting that. I'm going to say straight away, it's a nice lager beer, but it's not really true to the Pilsen style, I have to say that. Yeah, I think that's definitely a fair statement. If this beer was to be labelled like a sort of Czech Letsak, then I'd say they've done a really good job of this. I would say that, because it's a lot closer to a Czech Letsak, like a Czech amber lager, than it is to a Pilsen. It does have, in the aftertaste, a little bit of the kind of drier Pilsner malty characteristics. But it's just, like I say, the level of sweetness and things that this one has, and the oiliness and things, it just, for me, it just doesn't tick the boxes of a Pilsner. It is more like a Czech Letsak for me. But it's still, if they did label it as that style, I would say they'd got it pretty much bang on. That's the thing. So yeah, I'll give them praise for producing a good lager, but I don't think this one, to label it as a Pilsen, I don't think works too much. You can get a little bit of the Pilsner malt in the aftertaste and stuff, but yeah, absolutely, this is more along the lines of like a Czech Letsak beer. So yeah, but still, it's good stuff, and it shows you these guys can do good. If this is one of the first lagers they've done, which I believe it is, it shows you they can do good quality lagers actually. So they should keep working on these and put out a few different ones. You know, try some Dunkels and Killer Pills and stuff like that. So yeah, nice drinkable lager, as I say, just not really true to the Pilsen style for me. One thing I should also point out is for me there is quite a big distinction between the Czech Pilsen and the German Pilsner. For me, quite often the German ones tend to be a little bit cleaner and more crisp, if that makes sense. Often a little bit drier as well, whereas the Czech ones tend to be a little bit more bready and yeasty, but still have the dryness in the aftertaste. So that's one thing to keep in mind with these beers, I would say. So, yeah, in terms of the, we'll break this beer down and just describe it for you a wee bit more in depth, as we always do. Middle third of your palate then. So you can feel the backbone of this beer is absolutely, it's got a little bit of that kind of fresh white bready bread crust in there. That forms the backbone of the beer. On top of that, you have, as you move further forward on that middle third of your palate, you get a little bit more of a kind of woody, you do get a little bit of woodiness coming out of the beer for sure. So yeah, absolutely. You've got a little bit of a kind of a little bit of a woody character in there. Fresh brown bready bread crust for sure. A little bit of woodiness, and then above that you get a layer of a kind of Jacob's cream crackery note coming out of this one, which I do like. So that kind of lingers there into the aftertaste. Brown bready bread crust, which I do like as well. Wholemeal brown bready character, as I say, which is nice, and the brown bready character has a little bit of graininess and stuff to it. But what you get above the brown bready character is a layer of white bread, and it's kind of toward the back of that middle third of your palate that you get more of the you get a little bit more of the kind of Pilsner malty type thing. So yeah, you've got that dry kind of Pilsner malt type quality at the back there, which is interesting. So yeah, you've got that, like I say, just at that back of that middle third of your palate, you really get a bit of the Pilsner malty dryness. Fluffy white bready layer there. Then above that, you get a little bit of the more kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing. So like in the dead centre of your palate, you've got a little bit of an oily sweet caramel in there. So yeah, oily sweet caramel, a little bit of McVitie's digestive biscuit just coming out beyond that. And then you have, how do you say, you've got a little bit more kind of woodiness and things in there too, which is interesting. So yeah, I certainly like how that pieces together in this one. So yeah, dead centre of your palate, a bit of sweet caramel, and as you move out further toward the edges of your palate there, you can feel there's a little bit more McVitie's digestive biscuit, and there's almost a slightly more leathery brown sugary character to this beer as well. So that makes me wonder if they have done a slightly longer wort boil to this one, because that could explain the slightly more amber colour that you get out of this one, to be honest with you as well. So you get that slightly more oily amber colour to this one, a little bit of biscuit as we say. So yeah, the way that this goes together, I think, is really quite interesting. Middle third of your palate has a fair little bit of complexity to it. But as I say, just the way this beer turns out with a bit more brown sugar and the breadiness and stuff, it does really remind me more of a Czech Letsak, the amber lager, than it does a Pilsner. So yeah, that's worth bearing in mind. So in terms of the middle third of your palate, I think we've said everything we need to. So back third of the palate, you've got that border region between middle and back third of your palate. You get a nice little bit of a bready build-up in this one there. So you can feel that kind of brown bready character. But then, yeah, the base of that back third of your palate, there's a little bit more kind of McVitie. There's a little bit more. You get more of the bread crust, and it has that kind of dry, grainy character coming out of it. Above that, you have a little bit more of a kind of Jacob's cream cracker type quality as well. And then above that, you can feel these flavours, I should point out as well, more dry and bitter flavours for me come out further back on the palate. So absolutely these flavours are a little bit kind of more dry and bitter in my mind. So yeah, you can absolutely get those qualities out of this beer. Then yeah, the kind of fluffy brown bready layers there, you can feel it's a little bit taller and a little bit more airy. Then you've got the white bready character above that, which is even taller and more airy as well. And then you get the nice kind of crisp character coming out of it too. You can feel the Pilsner malt is in that border region, and it just creeps over the top of the bready character too. And then above everything else, you've got some more yeasty elements coming out of this one too. So yeah. Yeah. So the way that goes together is quite nice. You can feel back third of the palate, the flavour of the beer is taller. Then as you come further forward into the middle third of your tongue, it just kind of squashes together and condenses down. So yeah, I like that about this one. Yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, back corners of the palate, you've got a little bit of a, you do have a little bit of a kind of more earthy character coming out. This one, as I said, the earthiness in these Swedish grown varieties of German hops it's a little bit more prominent. So yeah, you've got a good little bit of earthiness to this beer. Then as you come further forward, you get a little bit more of a herbal character. The herbal character is a little bit drier, of course, too. Then as you push further forward toward the front corners of the palate, you've got a little bit more of a kind of floral aromatic note out of this one. And it does have a wee bit of bitterness to it, actually, this beer. So that is one of the things that pushes it toward the kind of Pilsner, the Pilsner end of the spectrum, if we can call it that. But round the front curve of the tongue, the beer is definitely lighter and more grassy. I would absolutely say that. So you've got that lighter grassiness in there, a wee bit of zesty character as well. And then on the front third of your palate, you can, or just round the front curve of the tongue, you can feel that little bit of slightly wet and slightly zesty grassiness as well. So, the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of bready build-up in there, which is kind of interesting. So you get a nice little bit of kind of brown bready build-up. The base of that front third of your palate, as I say, is a little bit more kind of, you get a little bit of the wholemeal brown bread in there. You've got the bread crust as well, and that feels a little bit dry too. The further you go into the aftertaste with this beer, yeah, the bready characters certainly show you more graininess. It is absolutely a fair statement to make. So you can feel that in here. Above that, you do get a little bit of the smooth white bread, and in the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you can feel the breadiness just builds up a little bit, but you certainly get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So at the back of that, middle third of your palate, at the back of that front third of your palate, I should say. Sorry, brain isn't working today. At the back, you certainly get some of those nice kind of, oily sultana notes. You can feel that in there. As you move further forward, you get a little bit of kind of oily, peary quality. And as you reach the front half of that front third of your palate, you can feel the sapphire comes out more. You get more of that kind of oily, orangey type character. But there's also just a wee touch of lime, I think, behind the very kind of front tip of your tongue, almost like a kind of fresh green apple as well. So the pear, the sultana, and the fresh green apple, these are things that you quite commonly find in Pilsners, and you're certainly getting that out of this one. But I think that's everything we really need to say about the flavour of this beer. As I say, I wonder if they've maybe just done the wort boil a bit too long for this one, and that's why the beer has turned out to be, amber. But in some ways, this beer, when I think about it, it is like a slightly more bitter. It really is a little bit like a more kind of bitter version of a Czech Litzak amber lager. So yeah, that's kind of what's in my head with this one. As I say, it's a nice lager beer and it's done well, but it's just not very true to the Pilsen style, I would say. But it's quite interesting to see the Swedish ingredients in this one. Of course, one of the kind of regular beers you'll find is the Skånsk Pilsner from Eslöv Brewery here in Skåne as well. They are based in Eslöv, and so they do something similar to this. They have the Pilsner with all Skånsk ingredients, which I think is very, very cool. But yeah, I think this one, for me, it's a really nice lager beer, and I would like to see them kind of experiment more with lagers going forward on the basis of this one. But this is definitely more of a Litzak. I think they need to, if they're going to do a Pilsner type beer, it has to be a little bit lighter, maybe not quite as caramelly and stuff like that, and it has to be a wee bit more kind of crisp and bready, if you like, but still a nice lager beer, and for that it gets a thumbs up from me. I wouldn't hesitate to drink it again, but I do think they need to kind of rebrand this one, maybe. I think that's a good way to put it. But yeah, let's round off this review with a wee look at the mouthfeel then. So yeah, for me, mouthfeel wise, this beer, it's kind of top end and light bodied. The carbonation is quite smooth in this one. As I said a few times, this beer does have a little bit of an oily mouthfeel to it. A little bit of dryness in the aftertaste as well, and it does have a wee bit of crispness. So the dryness and the crispness are things that kind of push it toward the Pilsner category, along with the little bit more bitterness that it has. On that note, I would say that this beer has maybe about 30-ish IBUs, which is normal for a Pilsner, a Czech Pilsner style. You do expect a bit more bitterness out of these, but the malt, as we said, it's got a bit of graininess, a bit of dryness, a little bit of smoothness, and it's got a little bit of sweetness, and it's quite a dry sweetness that you get out of this one. You've got the oily fruits in there, and yeah, the way this one goes together is just really quite nice. It's a solid beer, this one. As I say, it is like it's like a kind of Pilsner crossed with a Czech Letzak for me. It's not quite a pure Pilsner, to be honest with you, but still a really nice lager, and it shows that these guys do have potential to experiment with lagers a bit going forward. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. I think this has been an interesting one to try. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are as well from Ofrälse Brygghus are. But this one was the Ofrälse Pilzen, a 4.6% lager beer from Ofrälse Brygghus, a gypsy brewery but kind of based in just outside of Ängelholm here in Skåne in the south of Sweden. Thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out theirs, and I'll see you guys in another review very, very soon. Slange, skål, and cheers.